Hey everybody, welcome to Mental Health Matters. This is Tom Duff, Executive Director, Licensed Clinical Social Worker here at St. Louis Counseling. Check out our services at stlouiscounseling.org. Spell out stlouiscounseling.org. And this podcast, of course, we try to break down stigma. We try to make mental health okay to talk about around the dinner table, around the water cooler, or wherever COVID safe place you're at nowadays. We want mental health to be part of the conversation because we all have mental health. Some people are dealing with a mental illness, but we all have mental health just like we have a physical health issue, or physical health as well too. So bottom line is we know that mental health is all part of our daily lives, and it comes into every aspect of our lives. And so as always, we try to bring on guests that can kind of help us tell the story and how we do weave mental health into our everyday lives. And today we have a guest I'm so excited to talk about because there's a lot of paths that I have with you that I think cross over. But we have Daniel Horrell, who goes by Monkh.
How's it going? Thank you for having me
today. So yeah, thanks for coming on. It's a pleasure having you on.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm excited to be here and super excited to talk about everything mental health and how it correlates with the things I've done in my past and today.
Yeah, so, basically you're a musician, solo artist. You also have a band, Monkh and the People. On top of that, you're a community volunteer. On top of that, you have a podcast devoted to yoga as well, too, mindfulness in that regard. So there's a lot of crossover stuff. So that's why I'm excited to kind of talk to you. But all right, any musician I talk to, I have always a couple questions. One, I'm always curious when you found out that you had that talent, right? At what age were you when you realized, like, yeah, I can do this. I've got some talent here. And then, so I guess let's start first with that.
I'm still figuring it out, honestly. I'm like 20 some odd years into playing. I'm still figuring this all out. I think it was like the first time I picked up a guitar, I was like 7 or 8, and it was one of my oldest brother's friend's guitars. I was over at his house. I kind of followed my oldest brother around everywhere, whether he liked it or not. So I was over at his friend's house, and I picked up a guitar and played a little bit of, I just kind of heard it in my head and actually played like Iron Man by Black Sabbath.
Nice.
And they all kind of stopped and was like, wait a minute, like, how did you do that? And I was like, I just heard it and played it. And they're like, oh, you have something here. So all their attention reverted to me, and then they kind of, were like, we're going to teach you how to play. So that's really kind of where it started right there.
Wow.
Like 8 years
amazing.
Old or something, yeah.
Wow, amazing. So then, what would you say? What's your musical influences? Who are starting out and into today? Like, who do you look to?
It's really interesting, actually, because like I said, I've been doing this for going on, a little over 20 years now. So it's gone through everybody. It started with heavy metal, and blues. So it started with even more like like the band Pantera and Black Sabbath and stuff, but also like Stevie Ray Vaughan and Jimi Hendrix as well. And it kind of, as I got a little bit older, went into like the Grateful Deads and Led Zeppelin, and then I did a little bit of stuff out in Boston, and that's where I got into jazz. So going into like jazz guitar players and like Bill Evans and Miles Davis and Thelonious Monk and stuff like that. I immerse myself in every single artist that I study, because I just study artists. It's not like I just like sit and study their music. I study like their whole backgrounds and their lives, because I feel like that dives me into their, like, where they're coming from as far as music goes. And so, man, it's a hard answer. I could say everybody, really. I can hear somebody 5 minutes from now and be like, man, I need to really dive into them. So just a little bit of everything, D'Angelo and Prince is probably my current ones right now.
Mm-hmm. So when you, and this might be hard to put in words, right? But when you start playing, when you pick up your guitar, I guess first of all, guitar, what other instruments do you play and dabble in?
Yeah, I started out the kid that ended up being my best friend and I consider my brother, his dad had a garage just full of instruments all set up and ready to go, really. And that's kind of where I was able to explore my musicianship as a kid. So, I mean, I was playing drums and bass and guitar, but guitar is my primary instrument, and I sing as well. But, I play bass and I play drums and produce music as well.
So when you pick up that instrument or when you're singing, right? Kind of describe for us the place you go to, what that does for your soul, and because I'm a big believer in music, and however you define music, right? Because it's so broad on a lot of levels. It's not just what we hear, on the radio or what we stream, but it can change your mood in so many different ways, and it can take a bad day and turn it good, and it can help us reflect. But what does that do for you when you're able to be the one making that music?
Well, let me start off by just saying that, I'm always been pretty spiritual, even as a kid. I think even before my musical journey, I was kind of on this spiritual journey, and just kind of went through each religion and studied everything. And that's, I started meditating at 13 years old and never stopped and stuff. So it's kind of like the same place that I go when I meditate, and I've always tried to tell people that you don't necessarily have to be in this, full lotus, position to be meditating. You could do it while you're walking down the street, or while you're doing the thing that you love every day, while you're cooking or whatever, So that's really the place I go. I go to this kind of almost like nothingness, where everything is just kind of like in the moment and present moment, really. Yeah, I mean, that's just the best way. Like, I don't know if you've seen the movie Soul by Pixar that just came out, but they have this part where, it shows like where musicians go and where somebody goes when they're in that kind of meditative state, that higher plane of thinking. And it's a good representation of like where I feel like I'm at, just kind of like in the middle of, like I said, nothing, but you think of nothing and everybody thinks of like darkness or something sad, and that's not what I mean when I say nothing. It's just like I said, in the present moment and the now, and it's the most serene place that I could possibly be, if that explained it well for you.
Yeah. What for someone that is curious about getting into music, and let's say they're young, or actually it doesn't really matter, right? And they're like, well, I don't know how to play, or it's too late in life, or it'll just be too hard, right? What advice do you give people when they want to either experience music, or either learn an instrument as well too? What advice do you give them?
Do it, just jump into it and find whatever it is that you're looking for within it. Everybody, that's the beauty of music. I feel like, in my belief at least, that everything's vibration and we all work off these frequencies, and everything's built off this one big frequency, this energy. And so music is just a tiny little speck of sand of that, and it kind of, like I said before, it kind of levels you out regardless of what angle you go with it. Every artist I've ever met, every musician, or every even listener, my father's not an artist, but he listens all the time. Music is going through his house all the time, and I see the place that he goes to when he listens, and it's just this most, mentally peaceful place I see him in. And so I would say find that, within your music, and that just don't, just take it as far as you possibly can. Don't listen to anybody else. Don't worry about the business side of it. Just have fun and find your peace with it.
Well, and I think that's that last part too is good advice. Have fun with it, right? And don't worry about all either the naysayers or the business side, right?
Right.
And sometimes what it does is it leads you down that path into just realizing, like, maybe it's not going to be the business side, but what it does for me and my soul, in that sense of my mood and how to adjust to, because I even know if I'm sitting here in front of a computer in the afternoon and I kind of hit that spot of like, I'm kind of, I'm like, the afternoon sleepies, or the hunger pains of like, I need that snack. Like if I put on music, and depends what mood I'm in that day or what type of music I might like, I totally leave those other feelings that I had and I enter into that realm. So, that's why I believe music is such a path to relaxation, to stress, to de-stress those situations in life.
Hmm.
What I mean, why do you think that is when, even stereotypically, you see people come home, used to be they put the record on and they'd sit down and have the music going. Like, why do you, as a musician, like, why do you think that affects us in that way?
Well, just like I said, everything's like what I believe, everything's a vibration. Our body is mostly made up of water, and if you've ever seen how water, if you hit something right here, I got this coffee here. If I hit it, you can see the waves in it. And so just the same thing with music, right? So if you're playing, happy music, obviously you're going to be more happy. Like you play a Bob Marley, which is all really positive. Even if he's talking about something serious, the music is positive. It kind of puts this whole thing over you, this wave of vibrations over you that makes you feel positive. If you're listening to sad stuff, you might even feel sad. Even if 5 minutes ago before you started listening to it, you weren't sad, it would bring up a memory. So I think, even going back to like Gregorian chants, Buddhist chants, all the monks do in every religion and belief, they kind of sit there and they go over the same vibration and same loop over and over again in their minds, and that kind of brings them to this point in time. I think it's the same thing with even music today. No matter what kind of music, even if it's the raunchiest music out there, it brings people to this place because it's just what it is. Like I said, everything's a vibration, and we're mostly made up of water. So in my mind, it just kind of goes hand in hand that we would completely immerse ourselves into that spiritually, physically, mentally.
Yeah, it reminds me of I had a long time ago. I went to a funeral for somebody that was a different culture from myself and what I was used to in growing up, and they sang. I don't know. It was probably like 4 songs in a row, right? And at first, after the second song, I was like, "Man, another song. This is different." But then by that fourth song, I was in a whole different state of feeling in regards to, what others were feeling in there, as well as just my own relationship with the person who had passed away, and some of the family members that I knew. And I realized why they did that at that point. And I was like, yeah, they just weren't singing just to sing, is because it's the process you're supposed to do according to their, culture. It was like to put you in this state of prayer, into this state of reflection. And it really does. I mean, so I think you described that great, especially with the vibrations, and recognizing that as well.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that it's like the question that you asked earlier, like where do you go whenever you're playing? I feel it's all the same thing, scientifically and spiritually, however you want to take it. I feel like for people that are going through whatever they're going through with their mental health, music plays such a detrimental part, and that's why with what I talk about all the time is like make sure that you're listening to positive stuff if you want to live this positive life. Because if you're listening to things, and sometimes positive things can take you back to a memory that might not be so well, but that also can lead you through working that thing out in your mind, and getting through that process, just like, counseling, talking through it as well. It's a needed thing, in my opinion. So yeah, to me, it just goes hand in hand with everything else in this world.
When I listened a little bit to a couple of your songs with Monkh and the people, and the instruments, the harmonizing, the everything that goes into that, and when which put me in a good mood listening to that music. That was something I was listening to yesterday, and the beauty of bringing that together, like when you slow down and listen and you look at those instruments and the different voices, the diversity of the group as well too. What kind of struck me as well. And at times I feel that music, it can be that bridge to a lot of the issues we face in our cities, in our communities, in our region, and nationally, all the issues that plague us. And like when you listen to how different instruments, different people can harmonize together. So I think there's a bigger message in that as well too, from what you guys are doing. And I suppose you probably have a story behind some of that as well too, bringing all that together.
Yes, it's one of those things that just it just kind of came together naturally. I see it from my perspective, and I was just kind of like, yeah, that's just how it worked out. I have a lot of different types of friends and family, from different backgrounds and different dynamics, and I was working with one set of people, and then I was working with another set of people with a different project, and I just decided one day to put those two things together and hope it worked out. And through music, it ended up working out, and we all became this one family between everybody from the ages of like 50 all the way down to in their 20s. So that's just kind of how it works. As far as like the music and the subjects I choose and the way I go about it, it's the genre, I guess you could call it. I don't like calling things genres, but you have to do it in some senses. It all depended on like whatever I was listening to at the point in time. But the subject matter, I always kind of want to, as an artist, I feel like it's important to talk about the things that are going on in society as well as trying to build people up. And so that's kind of where those came from. And I feel like the people that were around me in the group really played off of it well, and I was trying to listen to them as much as they were listening to my idea, and it just all came out the way it came out.
Yeah, that's an amazing story in the sense of, what here's another question, right? So I know sometimes it feels like I'm just drilling you with questions, but I'm
That's
fascinated.
Right. That's what I'm here for.
So like what drives you to, because what I want is for others to get on board with it too, right? But you're driven, from what I can tell, to make a difference, to make a change. It's not just you're trying to make music to make your career and become a millionaire and all that, and that's great if that happens, right?
Right.
But there's a meaning behind that. Like and even some of your work in the community as well too, as a volunteer. What drives you? Where does that come from in regards to your desire to bring together people and to address some of our issues in our region?
Yeah, it's a hard question because it's just something that I just want to say. It's just how I always have been. I feel like when you learn things, you should always give it back. And it's this big circle of life, and everything in between it, from the largest thing to the smallest things. So it's just how I've always been. I've always wanted to talk about things that will help people. Even in, I started out playing metal music. I did a lot with the metal bands for the first 8 years of my career. And even with that, I was talking the same subject matters. It never changed. So it's just something I feel like has always been inside of me. And even in trying to bring people up through my art and through my music, I always wasn't in the greatest mental state, whether I wanted to believe it or not. I'm very stubborn and sometimes, and I'm like, I'm okay. But maybe I had things to work through. I mean, I think we always do, essentially. We might be able to get to that later, but yeah, it's just one of those things that I feel like it's my tithe or my way of paying back. I think in certain ways we think that we have to throw money, at this organization or this, to me, which is great too. But to me, I'd rather give my time or my mind or, some inspirational words too, to help. And I find that that's always kind of been a little bit more heavier in currency than just throwing money at something, depending on, like I obviously have done that as well. So like I said, it's just something that I can't write a song and feel okay just talking all about myself, or I feel like I'm complaining or something, so that's something I've always struggled with as an artist, because every time I put ink on paper, it always comes out the way it, my music comes out, talking about, like I said, society, or even going into spiritual, things and political things. It's just the way it works, and it's hard to explain. It's just the way it is for me.
Mm-hmm. Now, where's the name Monkh come from? How did that come about?
Yeah, so I was just a very energetic kid. I had a lot of nicknames. and I'm a junior, so my parents never really called me Daniel or anything. Nobody in my family has called me Daniel, honestly. I was always called DJ, actually, was my nickname. But, also, things like Monkey and everything, because I always climb. We had this big tree in my backyard. I always climb it with one of my other brothers and stuff. And I kind of just broke that down throughout the years. But the spelling, Monkh, it's Mongolian. It's a mountain in northern China. The border of China and Russia is Monkh Saradik, if I'm not saying that wrong. But it means, eternal mountain. And so Monkh means eternal in Mongolian, and it kind of just comes through my whole belief, that our life is eternal, in the sense of our spiritual plight, that we're not necessarily the body, we're not even the mind, we're just this soul that is going through these different karmic layers from lifetime to lifetime. So I think it plays out with what I believe, and I think that's why I felt like it fit with my name, with everything that I did.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's always interesting to find out where names come from in that regard.
Yeah.
Now, the podcast, right? So you started a podcast focused on yoga. So I guess maybe start first, like when did you realize yoga is something that you would wanted to adopt? And then talk a little bit about the podcast as well, too.
Yeah, so like I said, I dove into meditation as a kid through different forms of paganism and stuff. And that right there, I think, meditation is a big part of yoga. Eating is a big part of yoga, and my belief, mental health, period. Your diet, everything that we bring into our bodies, whether it's music or liquid or food, it has something to do with mental health and my beliefs. So it all came along with that. And it was actually the physical side of it came after everything else. So I was doing a little bit of martial arts as a young teenager with my sensei, and through that, you have to stretch, you have to get ready, you have to stretch, you have to do so many different things. And I realized that, you can't really tell over this, but I'm a smaller build of human being, and so it was really easy for me, even as a teenager, to be able to stretch, and so that's through that. I didn't realize I was doing the physical sides of yoga. I was learning, I was a big Bruce Lee fan, so I had all his books, and essentially through that I was learning the physical sides of yoga and that, as well as meditating and eating right, and it all just developed from there. And as I dove into Buddhism, and then after that Hinduism, I was like 18 years old, then I started realizing, oh, this is an actual thing, and started diving into that, to the point now where, over 10 years later, I feel like I have a little bit of understanding to be able to kind of push that through my music and everything that I do, thus the podcast and everything.
Mm-hmm. And then you talked a little bit too about, we can always, earlier you were talking about, we can always improve and grow, make change in ourselves. And I find of yoga as well too, that's part of it for me, some contemplation in that regard as well too, and it helps me kind of center on some of those things also. From a standpoint of your philosophy about that change, and always we always can, where does that come from, and talk a little bit about that philosophy.
Man, to tell you the truth, that as well, it kind of always changes. I feel like everything, just being like water, being so liquid. Everybody is so caught up with their beliefs, and they believe this, and they'll believe it for the rest of their life. And that's where you see conflict arise most of the time, and people get lost in sections of their thoughts with those types of beliefs, because everything just stems like a tree after you believe one thing, then this moral and that moral, and everything starts, and then you'll find somebody that believes something completely different, and that's where this conflict starts, and you start building up these things in your mind that are more negative. So I like to be a little bit more fluid with everything, and if I say something today and learn that, a new thing tomorrow that's a little bit more expansive, then I'm going to go with that as well. That's a big part of Buddhism, I believe too, where they follow pretty much just every day as present moment in time. But um, to me, it's one of those things like working through your karma, through lifetimes. And if you see it, it's easiest to explain it like a video game. You turn on a video game, you get your missions done, and you move on to the next level. And you might die a couple times, and before you actually get those missions done and move on to that next level. It's like the same thing as that. You might go through a couple lifetimes before you get these karmatic layers out of the way. So to me, it's pretty much just why not work on them now so you can move on to the next level in your next lifetime. So it's like, I think somebody made the analogy, and I thought it was so great. Like, karma is like you're on a plane that's at a destination, and your free will is like whatever you do on that plane. So even on that plane, you could be making new destinations on that plane. You could be doing good or bad things on that. Whatever is going on, is your free will. And you can even change your karma by how you react to things. And that's essentially what yoga is. Yoga isn't to necessarily become this higher being and your superhero or something of that sense. It's more along the lines of always being in that higher state of being. And therefore, if something might happen, say if I were to come up to you and like push you or something, how you react off of that, right? Could be, either your higher state of being or your lower state of being, and yoga helps you stay in that higher state to, instead of being like, reactionary and say, oh, and push back, you say, hey, what's going on? Like, let's talk this out a little bit. And maybe through that, you're moving on through your karma, and through that, they're working through that negative karma themselves, and you're kind of expelling both ends there and coming to this connection and this agreement. Did I answer anything? I feel like I'm rambling.
No, man, no. That's great. I mean, I think that was a good explanation, because it's about keeping at that state of knowing yourself, at that higher state of knowing yourself, and making these positive decisions, or maybe not positive, making a decision. And hopefully we want it to be a good, healthy decision that we're making, right. Of course. But yeah, I mean, and to try to keep you at your best state possible. And it is interesting because, like I said, I dabble in yoga. I'm by no means, I'm a yoga with Adrian type person on YouTube. And, but it's like when I'm doing it, my mood is so much different, and I haven't figured out exactly why, but as you describe some of that, it just takes me to a place where I do just feel good afterwards, and it's just and maybe it is how you describe it, as being at that higher self, and feeling good. And that's what we want. I mean, it's mental health. Everybody is different, and everything that we experience on a daily basis challenges our mental health, especially in today's world, it feels like, right? But it's to be able to keep at that higher state of our own mental health on a daily basis that helps us make good decisions as we go.
Definitely. Like, I didn't, just to kind of back it up a little bit, I've gone through what we call depression and all these things. And for a minute there, was just kind of diving in. Like, I like to make the analogy that like our depression is like, can be a pool, and some people like sitting in that pool and just like, I'm depressed, and they're sitting there and they're drinking and they're smoking and they're doing all these things to short term subside that depression, right, and make them feel nothing, but in turn they're not necessarily working through it. And I was going through that a lot, and I finally woke up one day and got back to it. It was honestly when I had stopped doing music for a little bit, because I got in a situation. But once I had to wake up and kind of rebuild myself, I realized I had to work off all these things and then stop thinking about it necessarily as a depression and started thinking about it as like a spiritual awakening. And that's when I really dove back into meditation and physical sides of yoga, and then eating more healthy, and pretty much every angle of that. And I'm still really on that plight. And that's really what Mind, Body, and Monkh is. It's not me coming from any type of guru standpoint or anything like that. It's more of people watching me go through this process and expelling these things from my mind, and essentially, with guided yoga and guided meditation, and having guest ons that, that are proficient in those areas too, to finally, to hopefully find something in that and see that they can go through it too. Because like you said, today there's so many things, social networking, you just get on and it's just like everything's hitting you, just trying to knock you out with all these crazy stories, and and so it's just, just like I'm sure this show is, just trying to be that release, that thing that's kind of showing people that, it's okay to go through these processes, and we're kind of here for you.
Yeah, it's meeting people where they're at, right? And I think that's a big part of it, because what works for one person doesn't work for another. And then through both of these podcasts, yours and this one, it's like that's what we're trying to do is reach people, and whatever it takes is the other thing. And like even how you kind of described depression there, it's to work through that, and what it does, like you were saying, it just kind of takes you over, so to speak. And until you have that epiphany, that waking moment, that awakening, that says, hey, you've got to work through this. And I think that's a key phrase. And a lot of times, even with medication, there's people out there that need medication to help them. When we talk about depression, it depletes the chemicals in the brain. And sometimes we know that exercise, nutrition, sleep can help those chemicals rise up. But then sometimes people need that medication to raise those levels. But then you have to keep doing more with the medication. You just can't take the medication and it solves everything. You have to do that work, like what you're describing is huge.
Yeah, that's big with like Hippocrates, where he said, first, find your medication in food, but if that doesn't work, then go to the chemicals, and he literally just spelled out what you said as well, that you can't just necessarily go into those pharmaceuticals and take those, just like with yoga too. You can't just like do a 30-minute yoga session and then think like you're good, right?
Yeah.
It's like, this is all a workout. This is all something that, is a process. And just like playing guitar, just like playing music, I have to, leave here and go back and play, and warm up for another session. It's a warm-up process and something you work through every day.
What advice would you give somebody, like you said, you found yourself there at one point, like with depression, and you were recognizing some symptoms and something inside yourself that didn't feel right. Maybe it was a different pattern for you, or it just didn't feel right too. And I think a lot of times people, that's where it starts. Like something just doesn't feel right. But what advice would you give people that when they start feeling that, what should they do? What can they do? Or what worked for you, kind of like what you said a little bit ago?
I really just expelled everything. I started nitpicking everything in my life, even the smaller, when we think about it like addiction, we think drug addictions, which is a prevalent thing, obviously, in society today. But I thought about not just drug addictions. I used to smoke cigarettes and drink and all this stuff too. But I got rid of that through time, and then I started working on other addictions, other habits, and started really thinking about them and how much they were important in my life and really what they were doing for me. Even the people I was surrounded by, the type of music I was listening to, I really just immersed myself into really wanting to fix it in every angle and form. Now, I'm not saying that everybody has to do that, but at least start kind of like questioning, look around, see what's good for you, see what's not good for you, feel the people around you that are kind of making you feel a certain way, and at least try to, make a connection with them. If that doesn't work, it doesn't work, But really, it sounds so cliche. There's always a brighter side to something. There's always a light and a dark, and even if you're in their darkest point in time, just at least just see that light and work through that light, and you're eventually going to find it. I used to be that person that was like just so pessimistic, and somebody would come to me and try to give me a hug, and I'm like, back up, first of all, and then try to talk with me, and I'm like, I don't need to talk to you. I thought when I was a young teenager, even when I was diving into meditation and stuff, and somebody talked to me about counseling. It was like I've seen in one of your past episodes where, you know, you think that something has to be wrong with you to be able to go to counseling, and it's not that at all. You know, counseling is just nice to have somebody to talk to, right? And so that's kind of where I thought, that's where my mind was. And I realized that that's, you know, eventually, like I said, that, you know, there's always a brighter side to things. And that's when I opened myself up, and everything kind of flooded after that. So I would just say, like, you know, just try to see the positive, work on one thing at a time. Don't necessarily try to work on yourself as a whole every day. You're going to be exhausted, you know, but find one thing that you want to better, and then just make a goal and set those goals.
And I think what you describe is very practical steps that everybody can do, because you're talking about slowing down, taking a kind of look at yourself, and having some focus on yourself. And I think you're right too with the concept of, like you said, you know, there's always a brighter side, and that always sounds cliche-ish. But we sometimes don't say that because we think it sounds like a cliche. But you're right, because sometimes people actually need to hear that, and there really is. There is an alternative out there, and the person may not be able to see it. We may not be able to see it at that moment, but we need to make sure that people do know there is an alternative out there that is better if you're struggling, right? That there is better. And sometimes we have to help paint the picture for them as well too, because that provides a little something, you know, I like to call hope, in that sense. Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's, like I said, that's where counseling comes in, or even just somebody to have to talk to. Me, you know, I'm such a creative that, you know, I dive into music and even open up and feel like I said, I kind of just really study it, and that's kind of brings me to my peaceful point. But in saying that as well, you know, I've had a lot of great people around me to keep me going and push me through and say you have something, and I think that's really helped me as well. So it's always around, you know, people that you surround yourself with too is a big deal, I think.
Awesome. So as we wrap up here, if we are interested in, one, the podcast, where do we find that at? And then two, where do we find some of your music at as well too?
Yeah, you can find Mind, Body, and Monkh on Facebook. It runs off of Loco Radio STL, so you can go to Loco, Loco Radio STL at Facebook. You can go to Mind, Body, and Monkh with MONKH, that's silent H, on Facebook. Yeah, and then you can find my music on every streaming platform that there is. You can even Google MONKH on Google, and you'll find my entire list of things there. So.
Well, and it's definitely worth a listen, because, like I said yesterday, I was listening to a few of your tunes, and both solo and with the group. Good stuff, and it affected my mood for the better. So great stuff there, and I encourage you guys to kind of look him up. And thank you so much for coming on board today and spending some of your day with us.
Yeah, thank you as well. And hopefully we can switch this around and have you on the Mind, Body, and Monkh show and talk about some things as well. I think that'd be super great.
Awesome. Gives me a place to wear my yoga pants.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. Good. So thank you so much for having coming on today. And if you are curious about our services at St. Louis Counseling, check us out at stlouiscounseling.org. And until next time, remember, mental health matters.